Welcome to the Healthcare Plus podcast, hosted by Quint Studer and Dan Collard. I'm Nicole Webb-Bodie, partner at Healthcare Plus Solutions Group. Thank you for joining us as we bring together leaders and change makers from across the healthcare industry. In each high-impact segment, you'll hear about the latest challenges organizations are facing and learn how guests are rewiring solutions to drive real change. Plus, you'll walk away from each episode with practical tools, techniques, and best practices to implement in your own role and in your organization. For more information on your host or to listen to recent episodes of the podcast, please visit www.healthcareplussg.com/podcast. Now, I'm pleased to welcome today's host, Dan Collard, who will introduce you to our next guest.
Well, welcome to a brand new version of the Healthcare Plus podcast. I'm Dan Collard, and we've decided to really take a step into the video side of podcasts. And what better way to kick off a new version of our podcast than with a longtime friend. And so I am so pleased to welcome Tom McDougal, Dr. Tom McDougal, to our Healthcare Plus podcast. Tom, how are you? It's great to see you.
Great. Thanks for having me today.
Yeah, absolutely. This is also a first for us because I had the pleasure of being on your podcast over on the Healthcare Badlands several months ago. And then there was a kind of a sidebar conversation that was created the day we did that podcast about a book that you were working on. And that sidebar conversation turned into also a first for Healthcare Plus Solutions Group and our publishing company, Gratitude Publishing. When we had Firestarter Publishing previously, we actually published a lot of titles from other authors that came to us. And this will be our first with Gratitude Publishing. So this podcast, the conversation, there's quite a lot of first packed into it. But what it's not a first of is the length of our relationship. And so I'll share with the organization. I first met Tom back in the early 2000s when he was a hospital CEO up at a hospital in South Carolina, was part of a large proprietary health system. And what I remember was this was a market like many of us that have worn that operator's hat. It was a market where everything that maybe could go wrong had gone wrong. It was a tough market economically, and of course, the economy of the market tends to also impact the economy of the hospital. And that's what I learned about the background. But then I met Tom really officially for the first time. He got up on stage and he talked about the results at Springs Medical Center. And for every reason why they shouldn't have gotten great results, they got great results. And Tom, I remember you were sort of quintessentially up in that top 3, top 5 category when we looked at all the metrics. And that's my very first memory of our relationship. So I wanted to start off by that, but would also invite you now to introduce yourself to our audience and tell them a more fulsome version of your background.
Sure. Happy to. Yeah, I grew up in a healthcare administration family, had no intentions of being a hospital administrator. My father was in that line of business, and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. Thought I wanted to be a pharmacist, wasn't really sure. So my dad suggested, why don't you find out what a pharmacist does before you invest all this time and money? And I thought, hey, that's a pretty smart idea. Well, hospital was kind enough to give me an internship, and that's where I got exposed to hospital administration and just absolutely fell in love with what I refer to as healthcare as business on steroids. It's a very complex business, but matched up well with my personality and my approach. So I got master's in healthcare administration, master's in business administration, and jumped right in. And what I wasn't expecting is at age 27, I got my first hospital CEO job. Chuck Beeman saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. I was scared to death, but he thought I could do the job, and that's how it all started. So over 30 plus years, I was a hospital CEO for 23 years until last year, and decided that I wanted to stop doing that and do some other things for the rest of my career.
Well, and you got a good view because you operated within the not-for-profit side of the world. You operated in an academic medical center related side of the world, and of course the proprietary side of the world. What would you say it was? Was there a greater difference or a greater similarity as you think of those three different environments that you had a chance to lead organizations within?
It's interesting because my job really wasn't different. I heard somebody say a long time ago. They said all hospitals are for profit, or at least they should be. And when I let that sink in, I thought, okay, that makes sense. He's not talking about tax status. He's talking about purpose because there's no money, there's no mission. And so all organizations have to be focused on a healthy bottom line, not an exorbitant one, but a healthy one. And what I noticed in terms of differences between for profit, not for profit, even governmental or teaching organizations is the difference is the culture of who holds power. And so if you're in the investor owned side of it, the power is generally held by that corporate office. But if you're in a teaching type organization, the faculty has a lot of power. If you're in a nonprofit setting, then it tends to be some of the players at the board level or even in the community that have a significant amount of influence. So the difference between the types of organizations was really the stakeholders that you had to give attention to. But if you have a broad approach to meeting all the needs of the stakeholders, you're generally in good shape.
I agree. I agree. Like I mentioned earlier, when you and I were having that first conversation on your podcast with Healthcare Badlands, you happened just to mention as sort of a side note, hey, I've got this book. And of course, anytime someone says that, your radar goes up and you wonder, okay, do they really have a book? Is the book in their head? Is the book, on a PC somewhere? Is it on a lot of paper? And I was really interested just from knowing you and had a chance to connect you with our team. And over the course of the last several months, this book really has come to fruition. You brought it essentially pretty much done. Worked with our team, and now we're ready to actually introduce this book via this podcast to our industry. And the book is called "Karma Doesn't Need My Help." So a couple things. I'm going to share a couple of my quick takeaways, and I want to make sure that I'm reading the book like you intended someone to read it, especially someone that's been in the industry for a similar amount of time. But then, of course, I really want to dive into the background, where it came from. Was it something that was sort of iterative? Were these chapters that you sort of, wrote in real time and stowed away? Or did you just, wake up one day and say, hey, I've got all this experience and I really like to make it that much easier for someone maybe just coming in to the industry. I was with the folks at ACHE recently, and I was actually surprised. 51,000 members at ACHE, and yet 18,000 of them are considered early careerists. And all I could think about is what a great opportunity for someone like yourself to have impact on folks that are just finishing up their Masters of Healthcare Administration or already in their fellowship or coming into their first couple of years in their new roles in the industry. 18,000 out of 51,000. I guess had never seen the numbers before. I was kind of surprised. And I think that's really one of the neat things about having a book like Karma Doesn't Need My Help, because wouldn't it be great for someone to know this before they're into the business for 31 years?
Yeah, it's a yeah, and the book is interesting because it was probably 10 years ago that I decided that, one day when I retire from running hospitals, because I wanted to tell a lot of stories that I needed to retire from doing it. Because if you're still running hospitals, you want to get another job at some point, and sometimes too much honesty doesn't meet the level of appreciation of everybody. And so I thought about it, and it was all mental. I never wrote anything down, never did. And early in 2024, I had the honor of being on a speaker panel with the local ACHE chapter. And afterwards, the president of the ACHE chapter down in Florida came up to me and said that was awesome. And I thought, is he talking to me? And I have this approach of, if I'm going to be talking to a group of individuals, if they're not enjoying themselves, then we're doing it wrong. Because if they start checking their phone, they start doing something else. So I tend to be a little bit more entertaining from the stage. But he said, "We really want you to come speak at our annual event." And I said, "Great, I would love to." And he said, "We want you to be the keynote speaker." And I said, "Really?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, "What's the topic? Tell me what you want to speak on." He said, "Oh, talk about whatever you want to." Now that was overwhelming, because I thought, now I've got the pressure of being the keynote and having to have a topic. And so I decided I was going to speak on what I wish I'd known at 27 years old, and focus on 12 things that I learned the hard way over that time period. So I created this PowerPoint presentation for that event, and narrowed down from probably 20 things that I wish I'd known to about 12. And that's the first time I put pen to paper on anything related to the book, not knowing that was going to ultimately be almost an outline for the book. And so then fast forward to summer of 24 is when I decided to retire from running hospitals. And in the fall of 24, I started thinking about the book a little bit more. I said, I promised myself I'd write this book. Now the pressure's on because I've actually retired. And in January of 25, I started writing. And the title changed, the topics changed. I created this long outline that became about a 10-page document. And then I started writing chapters. And fast forward to our conversation that we had, is it was probably about 75% written at that point. And a colleague of mine and I were having lunch one day, and I was telling him about the book. And he was giving me his thoughts on it. And he said, "You really need a publisher." And I hadn't even thought about a publisher. And that's why I asked you about it, because I was searching for the organization that had done all of your books with Quint, and I couldn't find Firestarter Publishing. I know now why, because it's kind of under the radar, but that's where it ended up. But the book, the book's my passion. The book is really written, it's about business. Now, my stories are healthcare, because that's my background. That's where the stories are based out of. But it's about business lessons of what it takes to be successful as a healthcare leader or a business leader, but also is how to have peace as that leader, because that was the one thing I really struggled with over 23 years of running hospitals. Is I had so many moments when we were successful, or at the moment we may not be successful, but I just didn't have peace. I didn't have that confidence in my heart and in my head that all of the things we were doing were the right things to do. And the stress kept building up, all of the pressure kept building up. And so I wanted to focus on that. But that's kind of where the book came from.
It's interesting how much that correlates to, as we look across the years, the amount of CEO turnover in our industry. And there have been years when it's been much lower, and there have been years when it's been much higher. And I think at the root of a lot of that isn't necessarily always performance, but it's the other P word that you just talked about. It's the ability to have peace, and the ability to sometimes shut it off, which is really tough for a lot of us. When you go home, you sort of take it with you. You lay your head on the pillow at night, and a lot of times the gears are still turning. And that ability to have peace, I think, would probably, if we had enough time to do the research, would find a strong correlation in CEO turnover.
Well, it's interesting. My wife and I have been married for 32 years. She's a wonderful lady. And she's also my best friend. So she's the person that would always get, my thoughts and feelings and emotions from work. And I would try to be careful with it. I think we all do that. But it was probably 6 months before I retired. I was very frustrated with something, and I won't give details, but I was very frustrated with something at work. And she was listening to me one night over dinner, and there was a pause in our conversation. And she said, "You're done, aren't you?" And I knew exactly what she meant, that I just didn't want to be a hospital CEO anymore. And that was a hard feeling, because I'd been doing it for so long and I was so passionate about working with a team. that, I said, I just don't. I don't want to do it anymore. I'd lost my peace in it. And she said, okay, I'll support you in this, because she knew what it meant. Healthcare executives, we do reasonably well financially because of the amount of stress and difficulty and things that we have to go through. Compensation matches the stress and the workload. And she said, a couple of things. She said, one, she said, if you decide to do this, it is non-negotiable that we're going to do anything other than live in the state of Alabama, our home state. And I said, oh, that's an easy one. And she said, okay. She said, number two, she said, I am never moving again. And I, and I had moved her a number of times. And so I respected that. And I said, okay, those are easy. No problem. She said, I'm not done. She said, number three, you will never be a hospital CEO again. If you walk away, don't ever do it again. And that one hit me hard. I didn't really understand that one. And I asked her, I said, why do you feel so strongly about that? And she said something I'll never forget. She said, I've seen what that job does to you. You never stop. She said, it doesn't matter. We can be out on our boat on a Saturday, and I can see in your eyes you're thinking about work. Or I can see on your face that you're still frustrated about something that went on the prior week. Or the phone rings. She used to tease me because, I'd get home, some Fridays I'd get home by about 4:30 or 5, and I'd be on the phone for 2 more hours. And she'd look at me and say, why'd you leave the office? And I tell her the truth, I'm not sure. But it's tough, but I lost my peace. So it was a very hard thing.
Well, guilty as charged about the moves, about the phone calls, about the shutting it off. Anybody that's listening to this podcast or watching this podcast will likely feel very similarly. So, Tom, a couple of things that I walked away with early on. Now, you already mentioned one. It started with 12, and the 12 became 11.
Yes.
Any real reason why the 12 became 11?
Well, initially it had 12 lessons. And when I did the first pass through and I was about 70% done with the book, I decided one of the lessons wasn't big enough to be its own chapter. It wasn't big enough, and it made sense to combine with another. And so so I kind of downgraded. The lesson's still in there, but it downgraded from 12 to 11 weeks.
What I really like is that you're very upfront with the book in terms of how to read the book. Not designed just to sit down in 2 or 3 readings, but designed to take the lessons a week at a time. I love the idea that you provide reflections at the end of every chapter, which a lot of times, if you're like me, you're plowing through a book, you get halfway through the book and you're trying to remember what you read in the first 2 chapters there. So the intentionality of pausing and reflecting on each chapter. But I think a couple of my takeaways, something you did a really good job on, because you not only tell business stories, you tell personal stories, you tell family stories, you tell about your son's accident on the Wave Runner and a number of other stories there. So it's one of those books that it is probably as valuable on the personal side of things as it is on the business and leadership side of things. And I think that's going to make for, again, a well-read book, because sometimes you almost have to force yourself into thinking, okay, how would I apply this? But you did a really good job with the applications throughout each chapter. So that was one of my early takeaways. And then something that really made the book stand out, the idea that you also say in the very beginning, the book is built on the last 2 chapters. And so you really, in the way that you saw things, begin with the last 2 chapters where karma doesn't need my help and E+R equals O, a little bit of a sneak preview for our listeners on the last 2 chapters. And then you work backwards. And of course, you use Warren Buffett's associate, Charlie Munger, as a great example. Tell me about sort of the reverse engineering approach that you took with the book.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, E+R equals O, I actually learned that lesson from an author named Brian Kane. And he wrote a sports psychology book that I heard about. Very interesting, but it's part of his book. It's not the core of his book, but the concept is E+R equals O is short for event plus response equals outcome. And I read that sports psychology book, I don't know, probably 12, 15 years ago. And the concept is that we have zero control over the events that are happening around us. It doesn't matter who you are. You can be the president of the United States. You can be the president of Microsoft. You could be any important role. You really don't have control over all the things that happen around you. Um, but you do have 100% control over your response to those events. And your response, therefore, is what drives the outcome. So the concept is that I shouldn't worry about events. I shouldn't spend time stressing over those things because I can't control them. So why am I going to worry about them? What I can focus on, though, is my response. And what I really encourage people to do is when an event happens, the first thing you need to decide is what kind of outcome do I want from this event? So let's say, for example, using a healthcare example, that my anesthesiology group gives me notice of termination for my contract. That can be bad for a hospital. People who are listening are going, yeah, that's a problem. So the question becomes, okay, well, I can't control that occurring. So what outcome do I want? And if I can decide on what outcome needs to occur from that event, then I can tailor my response to be successful despite the uncontrollable event. So that's the last lesson of it, but it's also the very core of how I lead organizations is I just don't spend time worrying about things that happen around me. It's counterproductive. And so that's the last lesson. That's the ultimate lesson. The next to last lesson is what I learned from Charlie Munger, which fascinating individual. I've read a lot of information. It's just so sad to me. We lost him about 18 months ago at almost 99 years old. Amazing individual. But when he was talking to a group of business students at Harvard University back in the 1970s, he did a talk on karma doesn't need my help. And it was part of a larger talk. But basically what he said is that he had learned that people are going to disappoint you, either by omission or commission. They're going to disappoint you, or you're going to be disappointed with outcomes. And the default is that I want the universe to get even with that person. This person mistreated me. So I want them to feel this, anger, frustration, sadness, whatever I'm feeling, I want them to feel. And his point was, why waste energy on that? Because karma is an interesting thing. If you're a logical, rational person, karma makes no sense. It really doesn't from a scientific perspective, because, let's say, I have on a blue coat as we record this. Okay. And there are no elephants that are in my house currently. So my blue coat is keeping elephants away from my house. If we're looking at it from a pure scientific thing, that causation effect doesn't exist. Karma is more of a belief system. And so it's almost like an internal feeling that we develop. And what we learn from Charlie Munger is it is extremely counterproductive. It is not something you should focus on, because if you were spending your time and energy wishing karma on somebody else, what all are you missing out on? Number one, you're missing out on your own happiness. You're missing out on your own disappointment. You're missing out on opportunity to enjoy other things. And so the concept in the book is set it all aside. Just let it go. If you do believe in karma, and 84% of Americans believe in karma based on a 2004 or 2024 study I read, they believe in it. But why spend time worrying about it? If you really believe in karma, that the universe will take care of itself, let it happen. Why am I going to worry about helping it occur? And number two, why am I going to waste emotions on it? So those are the last two lessons of the book. But then I have 9 lessons that I believe have to prepare you really from a leadership perspective, from a management perspective, from a personal finance perspective, and from an emotional perspective, that if you can embrace these 9 concepts, then you can use the last 2 chapters of Karma Doesn't Need My Help and E+R = O. but you got to have those other 9 building blocks to be able to effectively do that.
It's awesome. It's a great way of looking at a book instead of just the sequential consuming of the book, but thinking about what do those last 2 chapters have that would then enable me to grab on to the first 9 chapters and be successful. Overall, as you think about the book about to come out, it'll be on shelves soon. What is it, if you could pick just 1 or 2 things beyond what we've talked about already, that you'd want readers to find value in the book? I sometimes think we overuse the word. What do you want to take away? And so, just like you found value in reading Charlie Munger's work, reading Brian Cain's work, and just like you found value in Chuck Beeman's Pearls of Wisdom, and found value in working for a guy that we both know so well, a guy that I sort of considered a father figure, David Miller. Um, what would you want the folks to find value in when they get to read your book about karma?
I think 2 things. One is that I'm hoping that the lessons that I share are things that others can learn easier than I learned them. Because, yes, I had a lot of fantastic mentors. Chuck and David are amazing individuals. And I had so many other individuals that were either colleagues or in a supervisory type role that spent time teaching me things. But the lessons I learned were the best were the ones where they prompted me but wanted me to figure things out on my own. And David was a master of that. David wouldn't tell you what to do. He would point you down the right path and make sure you stay on that path to reach the decision that he believed you needed to decide to take action on. He was a master of that. And so that's probably the most important thing is that I want people to learn some of those lessons easier than I did, because I made a lot of mistakes along the way. I did, and I wish I had learned a lot of those lessons a lot earlier, because I think honestly I probably would have been more effective and more likable as a leader at points in my career if I had learned those things earlier. Um, the second piece is that I want so that's more of an early careerist type group that I want that lesson with. I think the second real takeaway I want is from those that may be more experienced. And I want them to read the book and maybe get a chuckle and just think, it's not just me. Because we take a lot of pride in our roles, and we are very cautious to admit our fears. Fear of job loss, fear of missing the numbers, fear of disappointment, personally, or others disappointed in us, fear of making a mistake, because we feel like we just have to be so perfect in the way we do things. And you're always on stage. Everybody's always watching. I can remember during my days as a hospital CEO, I would be out with my family on the weekend, and it was not unusual sometime during the next week, either a physician or a staff member or somebody else would say, "Hey, I saw you over at Chuck's eating a steak." I didn't know they were there. But you're always on stage. You never have that break. But I do hope that people will realize that, it is it's okay that you're feeling what you're feeling, because you're not alone. It is a very hard job. And I want you to find peace in what you do, and to feel good about it. And be prepared that if things go south on you and you do end up with, an unfortunate event of losing a job or something else, it's not the end of you as a person. It's just a new chapter in your role as a leader, and how to be prepared for that might occur. Because you and I were talking right before we started recording, the turnover rate in healthcare organizations has reached almost a frightening level. Um, it happens way too frequently. I can remember 20 years ago, if you would hear that there was a healthcare executive that was terminated, it was scandalous. There would be the whispering. People would call each other and they would say, well, what happened to John? What did John do something he wasn't supposed to do? Or, what occurred? Interestingly enough, when I was writing this book, a healthcare executive in market where I am, he was terminated. And it occurred to me a few days later, uh, nobody chatted about it. Nobody called me. I didn't call anybody else. It never crossed my mind that he had done something wrong. It's just reached a point where we have so much turnover now, it's just not unusual.
Well, mission accomplished with some of your early thoughts on hoping that some of us that aren't early careers get a chuckle as I was reading stories like the plant ops generator story and the cholecystectomy story with the surgeon, and of course the board story. We can probably all relate to those board stories like that as well. So I'm excited. I'm excited to have the book come out. And now before we get done, let's also talk about, if we rewind back to one of the things that helped get this book off the launching pad. You got asked to keynote an ACHE event. So you're out of the CEO's chair, but would love to ask, are you interested in getting into that chair and in speaking with healthcare audiences, speaking with business audiences? Is that something that sort of is pushing your buttons these days?
Absolutely. Truth be told, I'm excited about the book, and I'm just absolutely honored, Dan, that you and Quint believe enough in my book to work with me on this. I have to tell you, I had a moment back in November, so just about a month ago, 6 weeks ago, when I got the final version of the book and the cover, and I was traveling that day. So I pulled over in a rest area. They wanted me to proof it. And I had a moment sitting there in the rest area where I thought, oh my gosh, this is actually happening. And I felt terrified because I'd thought about it for so long, worked on it for so long. So it's super exciting. But, truth be told, I'm excited about the book, but I think I'm more excited about the opportunity to speak to groups because of the opportunity for follow-up after that discussion. So if I can talk to a group of leaders, and I'm the kind of person that hangs around the hallway for another 45 minutes afterward, I'll talk to anybody that wants to talk to me. But I hope I'll have that opportunity for that connection. There's not a lot of connection with the book. When somebody's reading the book, I don't have the connection with them, but any and every opportunity to speak to a group of 10 people or a group of 100 people, I would be honored for that opportunity.
Well, that's another area that we're super excited to be able to support and to run up sort of right alongside you there as well. So for our listeners, our viewers today, if you're interested in having Tom come out to your organization, your association, whatever that gathering is, real super simple, just drop us a note and we'll put this in the banner and the link, info@healthcareplussg.com. And again, we'll put that in the link there. And Tom, it's gonna be great to have you join our speakers group here as well. It's fun to be thinking about tapping into your experience, the number of years that you put into making healthcare better, that I got to see up close and personal way back in 2007, 2008, when you were up in Lancaster, South Carolina. So sort of life really does come full circle. A lot of times folks say, no, I'm not sure that happens, but more and more and more, I think as you stay connected, life really can come full circle. So I'm excited. I'm excited about the book. I'm excited about the opportunity for you to get out and speak. It's one thing to put out a great album, but now you have to tour, and
Right.
then we're gonna help you every way we can, putting you on tour as well. Thanks for joining me today. It's great to see you as always. It's great to know that a friendship that is 18 years in the making is still here. We're still connected, and we're just excited to see about karma not needing any of our help.
Well, thank you so much. Thanks for having me, Dan. Thanks for believing in the book. And I'm looking forward to working with you.
Very good. We'll see you next time on the next episode of the Healthcare Plus podcast.
If you would like free resources and access to our latest books, articles, and industry insights, visit our website at healthcareplussg.com. We hope you'll join us next time as we continue our journey to make healthcare better for caregivers, patients, and communities.